Commander Veltar's forearms trembled as he watched another star system die on the massive holographic display. The red dots representing Catherian colonies flickered once, then vanished into the growing black void that marked Ravik territory. 7 worlds in 30 days. 7 billion lives consumed by the hungry darkness. Status report. Veltar's voice cracked through his translator unit. His blue-scaled face showed exhaustion that had become permanent over the past 3 years of endless retreat. Sir, the Ravok bioships have increased by 40% since last week, reported his tactical officer, a tall, gray-skinned being from the Nexus worlds. They're using our own destroyed vessels as raw material. Every ship we lose makes them stronger. Veltar closed his primary eyes, feeling the weight of an entire alliance's survival on his shoulders. The Catherian alliance had been formed for exploration and peaceful contact between species. Their ships were designed for long-range, scientific missions, equipped with advanced sensors and comfortable living quarters. Beautiful vessels that could travel between galaxies, carrying diplomats and researchers to make contact with new civilizations. But they were useless against an enemy that viewed everything as food. The Ravik. The swarm appeared 3 years ago from the galaxy's dark edge, moving like a plague across star systems. Their bioships weren't built, they were grown. Massive creatures that could reproduce in space, feeding on metal, energy, and organic matter. When they consumed a world, they didn't just take resources. They took everything, leaving behind empty rock floating in space. Show me the latest battle footage from the Zeta Prime system, Veltar ordered. The hologram shifted, displaying the final moments of Admiral Kexron's fleet. 23 Catherian ships, the pride of their defensive force, faced against a Ravik swarm cluster. The bioships moved like a school of metallic fish, their hulls pulsing with organic light. They fired streams of acid that melted through Catherian armor like it was paper. Veltar watched his people die again. The Catherian ships fired their energy weapons, creating beautiful light shows that barely scratched the Ravik hulls. When the bioships closed distance, they literally ate the smaller vessels, absorbing them into their growing mass. Enough, Veltar whispered. Turn it off. The war room fell silent. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Veltar could see the refugee ships arriving at their hidden base in the asteroid field. Families who had lost everything. Children who would never see their homeworlds again. His communications officer, a young Catherian named Zarlat, approached nervously. Commander, we've received reports from the outer colonies. Ravak are moving toward the inner systems. At their current speed, they'll reach our core worlds within 6 months. 6 months. Veltar calculated quickly in his head. With their current losses, the Alliance fleet would be completely destroyed within 2 months. They needed a miracle. Sir, another officer spoke up. What about the humans? The war room went quiet. Everyone had heard of the humans, the new species that had recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They were primitive compared to most Alliance members, having only developed spaceflight a few centuries ago. But there were stories. Strange. Stories about their military capabilities. The humans. Veltar considered this. They're barely evolved beyond planetary warfare. What could they possibly offer that our advanced civilizations cannot? With respect, sir, Zarelot said carefully. Our advanced civilizations are losing. Maybe? Maybe we need someone who thinks differently. Veltar stared at the tactical display showing Ravok movements. Red arrows pointed toward every remaining Alliance world like bloody spears. He thought about the millions of refugees, the children, crying for parents consumed by bioships, the empty space where thriving worlds once existed. Contact the humans, he finally ordered. Send them our situation report. Request basic supplies, defensive weapons, anything they can spare. Tell them. He paused, swallowing his pride. Tell them we're dying. 3 days later, deep in Sol systems, orbital installations, Admiral Park Kiwan sat in his command chair, reading the most interesting message he'd received in years. The translation software worked perfectly, converting alien languages into crisp Korean text on his display. "Da-da!" He called to his aide, Colonel Kim Nara, who was reviewing fleet reports at a nearby console. Come look at this. Kim Nara approached, her black hair pulled back in military regulation style. She read over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she processed the information. An entire galactic alliance asking us for help. She said, Sir, they're describing bioships that can reproduce and consume entire planets. This sounds like something from a horror movie. Kiwan smiled grimly. Or something from our history books? Remember the locust swarms that devastated ancient China? Same principle? Larger scale? He pulled up the attached battle footage, watching alien ships fight against writhing biomechanical creatures. The alien tactics were all wrong, too predictable, too defensive, too focused on preserving their pretty ships instead of destroying the enemy. Sir Kimnara said quietly, They're asking for supplies and defensive weapons. They clearly expect us to provide minor support while they continue fighting their losing war. Kiwan studied the fleet compositions, casualty reports, and tactical analysis. 3 years of constant retreat, always reacting to enemy movements, never taking initiative. The aliens fought like they were trying not to lose, rather than trying to win. How refreshing, he murmured. Military problem that actually has a solution order, sir? Kiwan stood up, his eyes already planning fleet movements and supply lines. Prepare the War Council. Cancel all leave for the Strategic Command Division. And Nara? Yes, sir. We're not sending supplies. Smile was sharp as a blade. We're going to end this war. The Catherian shuttle docked with Luna Station's civilian port, its elegant curves looking out of place among the angular human cargo vessels. Commander Veltar adjusted his ceremonial robes, expecting to meet with warehouse managers and supply officers. After all, they had requested basic aid from what they considered a primitive species. Remember, Ambassador Zexon whispered to his delegation as they walked through the station corridors. These humans are new to galactic politics. Be patient with their simple ways. The human escort, a young lieutenant named Park Juan, led them through surprisingly busy corridors. Veltar noticed something odd. Everyone they passed wore military uniforms. Not the casual clothes of supply clerks, but the sharp, disciplined appearance of soldiers. Excuse me, Veltar said to their guide. We were expecting to meet with your logistics department. Lieutenant Park smiled. Change of plans, sir. Admiral's orders. They entered what Veltar thought would be a conference room. Instead, the doors opened into a massive command center that took his breath away. The chamber stretched 3 stories high, filled with holographic displays showing star maps, fleet positions, and tactical analysis. Hundreds of human officers worked at glowing consoles, their fingers dancing across controls that managed data streams from across the galaxy. This is impossible, whispered Zexon. They're a primitive species. How do they have technology more advanced than ours? The centerpiece of the room was a massive 3-dimensional display showing the entire local galactic arm. Red zones marked Ravik territory, blue zones showed Catherian space, and green zones represented neutral systems. But what shocked Veltar was the detail they could see individual ship movements, supply convoys, even the energy signatures of planetary defense systems. Welcome to humanity's Strategic Command Center, said a voice behind them. They turned to see General Lee Minho approaching, followed by a dozen officers whose uniforms were covered in ribbons and medals. The general was a compact man with gray hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Admiral Park Kyuan, a tall woman with sharp features and the bearing of someone who commanded respect. General Admiral Veltar bowed in the Catherian fashion. We are honored by your attention, but perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. We only came to request basic supplies. Welcome to humanity's war machine, General Lee said simply, gesturing to the activity around them. Please, sit. Much to discuss. Ambassador Zexon clicked his mandibles nervously, a sign of anxiety in his species. We only requested basic support. Food, medical supplies, perhaps some defensive platforms. Nothing that would require. He gestured helplessly at the massive command center. All this. Admiral Park Kiwan stepped forward, her expression serious. You requested survival. We're offering victory." Before the aliens could respond, Captain Chosahi approached from one of the tactical stations. She was younger than the other officers, with intense eyes and the confident movements of someone who had seen combat. "Commander Veltar, with your permission, I'd like to show you something." She activated a control, and the central display shifted to show Ravik fleet movements over the past 3 years. The bioships moved in swirling patterns, consuming worlds. In what appeared to be random attacks, "Your enemy follows predictable patterns," Captain Cho explained, her voice carrying the excitement of someone who had solved a difficult puzzle. "They consume, reproduce, advance, but they have weaknesses." "Weaknesses?" Veltar leaned forward. "We've been fighting them for 3 years. They adapt to every weapon we use. They multiply faster than we can destroy them." "It's because you've been fighting them wrong," said Colonel Kimnara, approaching with a datapad. She was a woman in her 30s with the calm demeanor of an intelligence officer. "You've been treating them like a military force. But they're not soldiers, they're a biological system." The display changed again, showing detailed analysis of Ravik bioship behavior. The humans had somehow obtained internal scans of the creatures, revealing their organic components and biological processes. "How did you get this information?" asked Zexon, staring at the impossible detail. "We captured some of their scouts," Captain Cho said casually. "Took them apart, studied their biology. They're fascinating creatures, actually. Living ships that can reproduce, but they need specific resources to maintain their growth." "You captured them?" Veltar's voice rose. "That's impossible. No one has ever successfully boarded a Ravak bioship." Colonel Kim smiled. "You've never tried explosives and vacuum suits? Sometimes simple solutions work best." The aliens watched in amazement as human analysts dissected 3 years of battle data in minutes. The display showed supply routes that Catherians had never noticed, breeding cycles that followed predictable patterns, and command structures that had clear hierarchies. "Look here," Admiral Park pointed to a cluster of larger bioships. "These are queen vessels. They coordinate the smaller units and control reproduction. Your people have been fighting the swarm, but you've never targeted the queens." "They're protected by thousands of smaller ships," Veltar protested. "It's suicide to approach them." "Only if you attack from the front," General Lee said. "But what if you attack from below, from inside their own formation?" Lieutenant Park Ju-won, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "Sir, the biological analysis shows they communicate through chemical signals. If we could disrupt those signals, the entire swarm would lose coordination," Captain Cho finished, her eyes lighting up. "They'd become confused, start attacking each other." Veltar felt his world shifting. Everything the Alliance had believed about the Ravik swarm was being turned upside down. These humans, who the Alliance had dismissed as primitives, were revealing weaknesses that no one had seen before. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How do you see what we could not?" Colonel Kimnara looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. "Humans have been perfecting warfare for 10,000 years. We've fought with sticks and stones, swords and shields, guns and bombs, and now spacecraft and energy weapons. This is what we do." "But you're a young species," Ambassador Zexon protested. "You've barely achieved interstellar travel." "Young in space, old in war," Admiral Park replied. "We've had 5,000 years of recorded military history. We've studied every conflict, learned from every defeat, perfected every victory. When we see an enemy, we don't just see what they are, we see how to destroy them." General Lee gestured to the tactical displays around them. "Your alliance was built for peace. That's admirable. Peace doesn't teach you how to fight a war. When you asked for our help, you weren't just asking for supplies. You were asking for something your civilization has never developed." "What's that?" Veltar asked. "The knowledge of how to win." The first sign that humans thought differently came when Commander Veltar watched Earth's orbital shipyards come alive. What he expected were supply ships and maybe a few escort vessels. Instead, the space around Earth transformed into the largest military mobilization he had ever witnessed. Massive carrier ships, each one the size of a small city, detached from construction platforms that had been hidden behind asteroids. These weren't just warships. They were mobile factories, command centers, and entire military bases compressed into vessels that could travel between stars. The lead carrier, humanity's flagship called Indomitable, stretched over 5 kilometers, long and bristled with weapon systems the Catharians couldn't even identify. "How many ships do you have?" Veltar asked Admiral Park Kiwan as they stood on the flagship's bridge, watching the fleet assemble. "This mobilization includes 437 vessels," Admiral Park replied casually, as if discussing the weather, plus support craft. Veltar's mandibles clicked in shock. 400, but that's larger than our entire Alliance fleet. Your fleet is substantial, Veltar managed, trying to hide his amazement. Admiral Park smiled grimly. "This isn't our fleet. This is our advance force." The bridge around them hummed with activity. Human officers worked at stations that displayed real-time information from across the galaxy. Veltar watched as they tracked individual Ravik bioships, monitored communication frequencies, and analyzed patrol patterns with precision that made Catharian technology look primitive. Admiral called out Lieutenant Park Jiwan from her station. "Reconnaissance drones have completed their survey of the Zeta sector. Uploading data now." The main display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of Ravo-controlled space. But this wasn't the simple territorial map the Catharians used. This showed supply routes, breeding locations, resource flows, and movement patterns that revealed the hidden structure of the swarm's operations captain. Cho Sahi approached the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Commander Veltar, look at this," she said, highlighting specific paths through space. "Your people have been thinking of the Ravik as an invading army. They're actually more like a biological ecosystem." She zoomed in on a cluster of bioships, moving between star systems. "See these patterns? They're not random. The swarm follows specific routes to gather resources, just like blood vessels in a body. Cut off the supply lines, and the organism dies." Veltar studied the display, seeing connections his people had missed. "We always assumed they were unpredictable, chaotic." "Nothing in nature is truly chaotic," Colonel Kim Nara said, joining them at the tactical station. She carried a datapad showing biological analysis of captured Ravak specimens. "Everything follows patterns, even if those patterns are complex. The swarm spreads like a virus, consuming resources and reproducing. But viruses can be starved." Human strategy began to unfold like a complex chess game. While the Catharians had spent 3 years building defensive lines around their remaining worlds, the humans were preparing to strike at targets the Alliance had never considered. "Show them the reconnaissance data." Admiral Park ordered. Captain Cho activated a new display that made Veltar's breath catch. Hidden throughout Ravik territory were massive breeding facilities, organic structures the size of moons, where new bioships were grown. The Catharians had never detected them because they weren't looking in the right places. "These are their nurseries," Captain Cho explained. "They're hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems, places no one would think to look. Each facility can produce hundreds of bioships per cycle." "You found their breeding grounds?" Veltar whispered. "We've been searching for them for years." "You were looking for military targets," Colonel Kim replied. "We looked for biological ones. The swarm doesn't build factories, they grow them. Once you understand their life cycle, finding the nurseries becomes simple." General Lee Minho materialized on the bridge through a holographic communicator, speaking from his position aboard one of the construction ships. "Admiral, forward base. Alpha is operational. We're beginning Phase 2 of the deployment." Veltar watched the tactical display update as human forces spread across space in a pattern that defied everything he knew about military strategy. Instead of forming defensive lines or attacking Ravok fleets, they were establishing bases in empty systems, creating a network of hidden facilities throughout the galaxy. "What are you building out there?" he asked. "Forward operating bases," generally explained through the CUM. "Each one is a complete military facility, shipyard, weapons platform, communication hub, and supply depot. We're not just fighting in your space, Commander. We're taking control of it." The scale of the human operation was staggering. Veltar watched as construction ships arrived at predetermined coordinates and began assembling structures from prefabricated components. Within hours, empty space transformed into fortified positions that could support entire fleets. But why build bases in empty space? Veltar asked. The Ravok will just go around them. Defense is for when you're losing, General Lee replied, his image flickering slightly on the holographic display. We're here to win. These bases aren't defensive positions, they're launching points for our offensive operations. Colonel Kim pulled up a different tactical view showing the expanding network of human installations. Each base extends our operational range by a factor of 10. From these positions, we can strike anywhere in Ravik territory within hours, instead of weeks. The genius of the human strategy became clear as Veltar studied their deployment. They weren't just bringing weapons to fight the swarm, they were bringing the infrastructure to manufacture weapons, gather intelligence, and coordinate attacks on a galactic scale. Your fabrication ships, Veltar observed, they're not just building bases. They're building an entire military network. Exactly, Admiral Park nodded. When humans go to war, we don't just send soldiers. We send the entire industrial capacity needed to win. Every base can produce ammunition, repair ships, process intelligence, and coordinate with every other base in real time. Captain Cho highlighted specific installations on the display. These aren't just military bases, they're nerve centers. Each one monitors Ravik activity across dozens of star systems and can respond to threats automatically. The swarm moves fast, but information moves faster. Lieutenant Park looked up from her station. Admiral intelligence reports are coming in from the reconnaissance network. We're getting detailed scans of Ravik bioship internal structures. Excellent, Colonel. Kim smiled grimly. Time to turn their own biology against them. We don't just destroy enemies, we turn their strengths into weaknesses. Veltar felt a chill as he realized what the humans were planning. They weren't just preparing to fight the Ravik swarm. They were preparing to dissect it, understand it completely, and then use that knowledge to destroy it from within. For the first time in 3 years, Veltar began to believe that the war might actually be winnable. The countdown reached 0 at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, watching Admiral Park Kiwan prepare to unleash something the galaxy had never seen before. All units, this is command, Admiral Park's voice echoed across the communication network. Execute Operation Scalpel. Time to surgery, 0 minutes. Across 12 star systems simultaneously, human forces moved with precision that took Veltar's breath away. On the tactical display, hundreds of green dots representing human ships began their coordinated dance of destruction. But what shocked him most was what they weren't attacking. Admiral Veltar said nervously, "The main Ravok fleets are here, here, and here." He pointed to massive clusters of red dots on the display. "Shouldn't we engage them first, Admiral?" Park smiled grimly. "Commander, when you want to kill a tree, you don't attack the branches. You cut the roots." The first strikes hit targets the Catharians had never even considered. Deep in the Helios Nebula, Captain Cho Sahi's stealth squadron materialized around a massive organic structure that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The Ravik breeding facility was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in growth chambers where new bioships developed. Target acquired, Captain Cho's voice crackled over the comm. Beginning Phase 1 of the Biological Disruption Protocol. Her ships didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they launched modified probes that penetrated the facility's organic HULL and began transmitting corrupted biological signals. The breeding chambers, confused by the false commands, began producing malformed bioships that immediately turned on their siblings. "They think in patterns," Captain Cho radioed her squadron as chaos erupted within the facility. "We break the patterns." Veltar watched in horror and fascination as the breeding facility literally tore itself apart from the inside. "You know their biological signals? We've been studying captured specimens for weeks," Lieutenant Park Ji-won explained from her station. "Every communication frequency, every genetic sequence, every biological process, When you understand your enemy completely, defeating them becomes simple. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, Colonel Kimnara's intelligence division was conducting a different kind of warfare. Her ships approached Ravik supply convoys carrying resources between breeding facilities, but instead of destroying the convoys, they infected them. Package delivered, Colonel Kim reported as her stealth ship released microscopic nanites into a bioship's cargo bay. Beginning cellular reprogramming sequence, the nanites carried modified Ravik genetic material that Colonel Kim's team had engineered in their biological laboratories. Within minutes, the infected bioships began transmitting new chemical signals to their companions. The signals triggered an ancient biological response buried deep in Ravok's DNA: territorial aggression. Every strength becomes a weakness, Colonel Kim reported to command, as the supply convoy erupted into violence. Their pack-hunting instinct is now working against them. Veltar watched the tactical display in amazement as red dots began attacking. Other red dots throughout Ravok territory, they're fighting each other. It's biological warfare at its finest, Admiral Park explained. We didn't just study their technology, we studied their evolution. Every species has weaknesses built into their DNA. We just activated theirs. The most spectacular operation was happening in the Centauri cluster, where General Lee Minho was conducting what he called reverse conquest. Instead of attacking heavily defended Ravik worlds, his forces were hitting recently captured planets, where the swarm's grip was still weak. Planetary liberation successful, General Lee's voice came through the cum from the surface of Kepler 44 to B. Ravik ground forces eliminated, beginning conversion to forward operating base. But liberation was just the first step. As soon as the Ravik were cleared from a world, human construction teams landed and began building military installations at incredible speed. Prefabricated components dropped from orbit, assembling themselves into defensive platforms, communication arrays, and launch facilities. "Sir," called out Ensign Lee Ji-yoon from the communications station, receiving surrender broadcasts from 17 different Ravik subclusters. They're requesting terms. Admiral Park raised an eyebrow. Surrender already? The biological warfare is spreading faster than anticipated, Colonel Kim reported. The infected bioships are carrying the aggressive genetic modifications throughout their network. Entire sectors are consuming themselves. Veltar stared at the tactical display as the red zones representing Ravik territory began shrinking rapidly. What had been a solid wall of enemy control just hours ago was now a patchwork of isolated pockets fighting among themselves.
How this is
Impossible, he whispered. We've been fighting them for 3 years. You're destroying them in ours. 3 years of defensive warfare taught you nothing about winning, Captain Cho said as her squadron moved to their next target. We spent 3 weeks learning everything about losing, then we did the opposite. The human assault continued with relentless efficiency. Strike teams hit command nodes using weapons that turned the Ravok's own communication networks against them. Supply interdiction forces didn't just destroy convoys, they replaced vital nutrients with substances that caused bioships to weaken and die from malnutrition. Admiral Lieutenant Park announced. Long-range scanners are detecting massive bioship casualties in the core systems. Estimated enemy strength has decreased by 60% in the last 6 hours. Phase 2 initiation, Admiral Park ordered. Begin the cleanup operations. The cleanup was even more impressive than the initial assault. Human forces moved through former Ravok territory like a surgical team, identifying and eliminating the remaining threats while simultaneously establishing permanent control over liberated systems. Commander Veltar, General Lee's voice came from a liberated world. You might want to see this. The main display shifted to show a planet that had been consumed by the Ravik just weeks ago, where there had once been barren rock, stripped of all resources. Human terraforming equipment was already beginning restoration. Atmospheric processors worked to rebuild the air, while biological seeders prepared to restore plant and animal life. You're rebuilding the worlds they destroyed? Veltar asked in disbelief. We don't just win wars, Admiral Park replied. We win peace. Every liberated world becomes a fortress, a factory, and a home for refugees. The Ravok took territory to consume it. We take territory to protect it. 72 hours after the operation began, the tactical display showed a galaxy transformed. The vast red zones of Reva control had been replaced by green human-controlled systems and blue allied territories. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for years was reduced to scattered remnants hiding in the deepest corners of space, the Catharians, who had expected to witness a desperate defensive stand, had instead watched the complete dismantling of an interstellar empire in 3 days. The humans hadn't just defeated the Ravik swarm, they had systematically dissected it, understood it, and then used its own biology to destroy it from within. How? Veltar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Park looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. We didn't fight the Ravik, Commander. We performed surgery on them. The final Ravik bioship writhed in the cold vacuum of space, its organic hull pulsing with diseased light as the genetic modifications tore through its system. Commander Veltar watched from the observation deck of the human flagship as the creature that had once been part of an unstoppable swarm literally consumed itself from the inside out. The bioship's death throes sent ripples of bioluminescent fire across its surface before it finally went dark, joining the thousands of other Ravik corpses drifting through what had once been their territory. Final sweep complete, reported Captain Chosahi from her fighter squadron. No Ravik biosignatures detected in sectors 7 through 12. The galaxy is clean. Commander Veltar stood in the Strategic Command Center, staring at tactical displays that showed something he had never thought possible. Where red zones had marked Ravik dominance for 3 years, now only blue and green lights indicated allied and human-controlled space. The nightmare was over. I don't understand, he admitted to Admiral Park Kiwan, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone whose world had been completely transformed. How did you do this so quickly? The swarm had consumed entire civilizations. They seemed unstoppable. Admiral Park smiled as she reviewed the final casualty reports on her datapad. The numbers told an incredible story. Minimal human losses, complete enemy elimination, and 0 collateral damage to civilian populations. You asked for support to survive, Commander? We don't think in terms of survival. We think in terms of victory. The swarm was unstoppable, Veltar protested, his mandibles clicking with confusion. They adapted to every weapon we used against them. They multiplied faster than we could destroy them. They'd been expanding for 3 years without a single defeat. Nothing is unstoppable. Captain Cho, Sahi interjected as she entered the command center, still wearing her pilot's gear from the final cleanup mission. Everything has weaknesses. You just have to know how to find them. She gestured to the biological analysis stations where human scientists were still studying captured Ravik specimens. Your people treated them like a military force and fought them like soldiers. We treated them like a biological system and fought them like a disease. The solution was always there. You were just looking at the problem from the wrong angle. Veltar shook his head in amazement. In 3 days, you accomplished what our entire alliance couldn't do in 3 years, because we brought the right tools, said General Lee Minho, as he materialized on the bridge through a holographic communicator. His image showed him standing on the surface of a recently liberated world, where human construction teams were already rebuilding destroyed cities. Your alliance was equipped for exploration and peaceful contact. We brought 10,000 years of warfare experience. The scale of the human achievement was staggering. Not only had they eliminated the Ravik threat completely, but they had done it while simultaneously rebuilding every world the swarm had consumed. Refugee ships that had been fleeing the advance for years were now returning to restored homeworlds. Sir, Lieutenant Park Ji-Wan called from her communications station. We're receiving multiple priority transmissions from across the galaxy. Colonel Kim Nara approached Admiral Park with a datapad filled with incoming messages. Sir, we're receiving communications from 17 different alien civilizations. Shh. They're all asking for the same thing the Catharians did. Admiral Park raised an eyebrow. More requests for military aid? General Lee chuckled through the holographic link. Let me guess. They want support against various threats? Pirates, territorial disputes, resource conflicts? Actually, sir, Colonel Kim's smile was sharp as a blade. They want to surrender before we decide their threats. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Word of humanity's capabilities had spread across the galaxy faster than their fleets had moved. Civilizations that had never heard of humans a week ago were now desperately trying to avoid being classified as potential enemies. "Show me the messages," Admiral Park ordered. The main display filled with communication. Logs from species across the galaxy. The hegemony of Tsar, the Crystal Republics, the Nomad fleets. The synthetic collective, all of them were sending diplomatic envoys with the same message. They wanted to ally with humanity immediately. The Draxian Empire is offering to become a human protectorate, Lieutenant Park reported. They're providing detailed intelligence on their military capabilities and surrendering their entire battle fleet. The Silicon Hives want to establish trade agreements, added another communications officer. They're offering to share their entire technological database in exchange for a non-aggression pact. Veltar studied the incoming messages with growing amazement. They're all terrified of you. Fear is a natural response to overwhelming power, Admiral Park observed. But fear alone doesn't build lasting peace. You need to show them that cooperation is more valuable than confrontation. She activated the galaxy-wide communication system, preparing to send a message that would be heard across known space. Is Admiral Park Kiwan of the Human Strategic Command, addressing all civilizations within communication range. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had just reshaped the balance of galactic power. Humanity is now accepting applications for alliance. Terms are negotiable, complete protection from existential threats included. We offer not domination, but partnership, not conquest, but cooperation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, over 100 different species had sent diplomatic missions toward human space, each hoping to secure an alliance with the new galactic superpower. Commander Veltar, Admiral Park turned to the Catherian leader. "Your people will always hold a special place in human history. You were the first to trust us with your survival. In return, we'd like to offer the Catherian Alliance a formal partnership in governing this new galactic order." Veltar felt tears forming in his large eyes. "You would share power with us? After everything you've done?" "Leadership isn't about power," General Lee said from his holographic link. "It's about responsibility. The galaxy needs governors who understand both peace and war. Your people know peace. We know war. Together we can build something better than either." Captain Cho approached the observation windows, looking out at the stars where human patrol fleets were already establishing security routes between systems. "The age of chaos is over. The age of order begins now." Colonel Kim pulled up a new display showing human construction fleets spreading across the galaxy, not to build weapons or fortresses, but to establish communication networks, trade routes, and research stations. "We're not conquering territory. We're building civilization." The Catherian Alliance learned a valuable lesson that day. When humans offer help, they don't just solve your problem. They eliminate the possibility of that problem ever existing again. The Ravik swarm hadn't just been defeated. It had been studied, understood, and systematically dismantled in a way that ensured no similar threat could ever arise. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had cowered before various threats began to hope for the first time in generations. Pirate fleets dissolved rather than face human justice. Aggressive empires became peaceful republics overnight. Ancient conflicts ended as former enemies rushed to join the human alliance. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and with them came a simple promise: ask for support, receive total victory. But more than that, they offered something the galaxy had never known, a guarantee that the victories would be permanent. The age of human expansion had begun, not through conquest, but through an invitation to join the winning side. And across the stars, billions of beings looked up at the night sky and saw not the darkness of uncertainty, the bright lights of human ships keeping watch. For the first time in galactic history, the universe was safe. The END